All right. Good evening, everyone, and I hope that you all are doing well. We have a small group tonight, but several people have contacted me telling me that they are unable to make it and would like us to record this session so that they can hear the updates of what has happened in the legislation session for 2022. I have spent the past 2 days in Indianapolis, meeting with legislators, kind of watching from the background. Nick Marshall's here with us tonight, and I saw him last week. He was there at the State House during Pack the House events. We had a 2-week event, and I think today was the last day of that. So he was there supporting educators and listening to their concerns as well. We had some big developments last night with House Bill 1134, which I'll talk about here in a minute. That is the most contentious bill. There's several that are attacking public education, but House Bill 1134 right now is in the forefront of everyone's minds because it is so egregious of just right-wing propaganda that public education teachers are trying to indoctrinate children and teach them to hate America. They have these people that are against teaching American history have some very closed-minded views and have caused quite the stink. I think it's a small faction of people that are making a loud voice. And so we're going to continue to make our voices even louder and try to defeat this bill. Similar bills across the nation have popped up, and they're going to continue to pop up. Like I said, I've spoken with several legislators about this bill. The legislators that I've spoken to all have concerns about the bill, even in the amended form. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So if you want to hit the next slide. First, I want to recognize Misty Rono. Thank you for joining us. Misty has always been a champion for public education. She was the PAC chair for the safety referendum. She was the founder of, I'm sorry, one second. The New Albany-Floyd County Community Connection, and she was Development and Communications Director of YouthLink. So Misty, or welcome Misty, you want to say a few words?
Thanks. No, thanks for having me. It's nice to be in this space discussing this.
So Misty and I have had several conversations about legislation that has come across the desk at the State House, and we're both disgusted every year. We kind of commiserate together and take comfort that we're both on the same page, and we can just comfort each other as it comes across, because each year is, I think, not going to be surprised, and every year I am surprised, and I don't know why, but I am. And so every year is different, and this year is definitely one for the books. So next slide. Thanks for joining us.
It does seem cumulative. I looked at my Facebook memories the other day, and it was, this is the worst year, and every year it's like
it's worse. It just gets worse. Yeah, and that's what you get when you deal with the super majority. So House Bill 1134, I am going to talk about the House Bill 1134 in its original form first, because I think it's important to note what was in that bill, what people were screaming about when it first was authored by Representative Tony Cook from the House. It has been sponsored by Senator Linda Rogers in the Senate. Tony Cook, the most surprising and disappointing thing about him is I've heard that he was the principal that was a champion for Ryan White. He was, when no other high school would take Ryan, or no other school would take Ryan, Tony Cook was the one that, he was the administrator, said, come to us, we'll take you. And I don't know what has happened since then in the 80s, but he's gone a totally different direction. I think you accidentally hit the slide, Amy, one too far. Go back to the, oh, there we go. Right there is perfect. Yep, that's good. So, and then Linda Rogers, who has also been an administrator, and has worked in the school system, is the sponsor and in the Senate. And
Recording in progress.
And I don't understand really. Hi, Sharon.
Hello, I'm sorry.
Could you please mute? Okay, I think we're good. Okay. So as I was saying, Sharon, or Linda Rogers, got some feedback. Is the feedback still there? There, I can mute her. I think I got it. I think we're good now. Okay.
Just a reminder if everybody can mute all of their devices.
Right. There we go. So Linda Rogers is the sponsor in the Senate and also an administrator. So the fact that she is sponsoring the bill is also something hard to fight, because when you talk to legislators, other legislators, some of their comments might be, well, both the sponsors of this bill were in the school system and they support it, so why shouldn't I support it? And that's a hard argument to debate, because they will say, well, I respect and trust my colleague and they must know what they're talking about because they've been in the school system, so I'm going to support what they say. Another problem is that I don't know why, but people that are in the in some legislations, people have told me that they don't think that CRT is a problem, and according to them, the CRT is a problem, but they don't think it's a problem in our area. But they think it's a problem in other parts of the state. And so I asked them to represent our area and represent and support our teachers. So that's kind of a little bit of the background of what has happened with House Bill 1134, or the background of the story of House Bill 1134 and how it came to fruition. The original form of the bill starts off with, it had a complaint wait, we need to go back another slide, Amy. Yes, right there. It had a curriculum materials advisory committee. It was called a CMAC, which included 60% parents and 40% teachers and administrators, but it never really specified teachers. It just said education. Each school board member got one parent appointment. It passed in the House 60-37, and then it moved to Senate. And then the Senate made some pretty significant amendments, which we'll get to in a minute. Well, I'll just go ahead and tell you the amendment did away with that. So that advisory committee, the Senate took that away, said you may have one if you want, but you don't, it's not a must. So you can go to the next slide.
It's a local discretion of the school board issue.
Right. This was also amended out of the out of the Senate version. A complaint process, they changed it a little bit more. It used to say that it included potential teacher license revocation if a violation moves to the Department of Education as wanton or willful. It enables the complainant to pursue the claim up to the chain if not satisfied with a prior decision, such as the principal, superintendent, school board, all the way up to the Department of Ed. The person that made the complaint will remain confidential, and therefore a complainant with an agenda is empowered because they remain anonymous, and you never know, the teacher would never know who it was that was making the complaint about them. And so that was pretty gross. That was amended to now if there's a problem, as it should be, you go to the teacher and then you go to the principal and then you try to deal with it, because 90% of the problems, even 95, 96, 97% of the problems, if there is something that is being taught to your child that you don't agree with, you can voice your concern and the teacher will work with you if it's a valid concern. For example, I taught Long Way Gone, so a book about Ishmael Bey when I taught English, he was a child soldier in Sierra Leone. I've had parents come to me and say, my child has experienced trauma. I think this is too violent of a book for him or her to read. And so I'd say that is a valid complaint, or not complaint, but concern. And I'm happy to give an alternate assignment. I understand and was willing to work with the parent in that area. And so that's what teachers do. And to imply otherwise is insulting. And Misty, anything else on that?
Yes, I mean it's dangerous in so many ways. If you happen to have some free time and you want to pull the campaign finance reports for things throughout the state, you'll see that there's a huge lobbying arm. The amount of money that's being exchanged, for candidates that lean in favor of charter schools and things like that. I mean, you just see it's a systemic chipping away, at the decision-making process of the schools. I do want to circle back just a minute, because what we know is, and we know this because we spoke to several legislators, and they said, this might not be an issue here. Like they might say, is CRT a part of our local curriculum? No, of course it's not. Are children being indoctrinated into some socialist cabal locally? No, clearly they're not. But in the meantime, people are responding at the whim of national political rhetoric. I mean, that's just what it is. People hear these things in national media, and then they show up to a school board all up in arms about systemic racism being an issue that's making children feel bad about themselves, and that's suddenly a problem. There was actually a legislator who vocalized the words that white children shouldn't be made to feel bad about themselves in school because of something that they're ancestors did. I couldn't even believe that those words came out of someone's mouth. So it exists, and it's a response to political rhetoric, and we know that.
Right. And thank you for clarifying that, because I've talked about this so much, I forget that background part is necessary, because to be honest, my mom had called and asked, about some of the questions, and I talk about so many things, this so much that sometimes I leave things out because I assume that I've already said it, but I haven't. So thank you for clarifying that. Okay, next slide. They had put that at one point they had amended it before. They had the major amendments, but they had amendment version removes the requirement to post lesson plans, but the definition of educational activity remains broad and requires posting of every activity assigned, distributed, and presented. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. Educational activities are also not limited to during the school day activities, and these activities are to be posted as far as advanced of the use of activity in the classroom is practicable. So what that means is they wanted teachers to list all of their lesson plans and put them by the summer, before the summer was over, and put them in a form. I'm going to close my notifications so that teachers could, or that parents could review them with sufficient time, and they could review and pick what they wanted to their child to learn, or what they didn't, and they could opt in or opt out. It was a different portal that the parents would review, so they could just go down and click a button and say no, 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 no. And so that was problematic because number one, we already do post our lesson plans on Google Classroom, and to post all of our lesson plans for the year was not best practice, because lesson plans are fluid, they're tentative, they change based on student need. And every day is different. So that was not even feasible, but that also has been changed a little bit as well. Next slide.
Christy, I wanted to add that I think what's been changed is that they're saying that pacing guides will be posted,
Yes.
and just so it's known, New Albany, Floyd County already does that.
Right.
Most, I think, larger school districts do. So
Can I just ask a quick question? Because I'm going to have to leave in a minute. I taught in another state and I posted this on some group. I don't understand why somebody feels that they need, except for maybe the pacing, that when the lesson is coming up, why would a teacher have to make every lesson for the year when all of that material, doesn't the district have the lesson, the curriculum for every grade?
Yes, and there's also parents that are involved with those curriculum determinations as well. And the district does have that. There are state standards that we follow. Yes, so there's already committees that have already formed that has those, and a lot
So
of
this is kind of redundant.
yes, a lot of times parents are
Okay.
involved in those committees. Yes.
All right, that I'm going to have to.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today, Ann. Hope to see you.
and Anne, I know that you, as a person who has some experience in the classroom, you understand these things, but to the average person who's never spent any time in a classroom, they don't understand the curriculum guide. They hear these things and they say, of course parents should have input. Of course parents should have transparency and know what children are learning about. And it drives all these false flags and gets people riled up. And the more that we're seeing the amendments being made to this legislation, we're seeing that all of the original intent is just being gutted and we're left with what we have already. So thank you for that insight.
And yes, and another thing that was problematic, I'm glad that you mentioned that, Misty, is that some legislators were passing out surveys to their constituents and saying, do you think CRT should be taught in schools? Well, half the people don't know what they're saying, but if the answer is yes or no, what are they going to say if they've heard negative things about it? Because you have these loud people and you have this political division in the nation. They're going to say no, but they don't really understand what it is. It's like saying, would you like to lower your taxes? So that was legislators are pointing to that and saying, well, look, this is what my constituent said. This is what, but it's not valid. It's skewed and it's problematic as well.
When your senator hands you the results of a Survey Monkey that's derived from his constituent mailing list, and it says, I have to take this legislation seriously because 80% of the respondents to the survey on my email list said that they think CRT is scary. That's where we are. Okay. It's not empirical data. Yeah.
Next slide. So the SEL stands for social emotional learning. And so social emotional learning can be anything from anxiety to critical thinking. Conflict resolution. And so they're fighting against social emotional learning. People on the right saying, when I watched the testimony last night, there was, honest to goodness, there was a man that stood up. He was the second to last testimony. And he stood up and said, I'm not giving the power to any teacher, any administrator, or any counselor to provide counseling to my child. I am the first and the last line of defense for my child. And I'm not giving power to anyone in the school system to help my child because I am the only person that has the right to do that. And so that is why they have included the social and emotional learning piece into this bill, which as a special education teacher, that is extremely concerning to me because, like I said, SEL is conflict resolution. And a lot of my job is just helping kids navigate their day, time management, helping them, which is an executive function, but helping them with conflict resolution, their anxiety, problem solving. That all falls under the umbrella of social emotional learning. And so this part said that you had to have written permission. The original version said you had to have written permission of from the parent before you could talk more than once to a student about something that fell under the social emotional umbrella. And a parent had 10 days to respond. And after that, if they didn't respond, then you could try to contact them again. And after that, you could try, and then you could move forward. But when all was said and done, it was around 30 days. So if someone has severe or very concerning social emotional concerns, then 30 days is way too long. So if you look at the text, it says, otherwise, the employee of the school district cannot provide ongoing and recurring consultation, collaboration, or intervention services without obtaining prior written parental consent. If the parent does not reply within 21 days, a second request must be made. The parent has 10 more days to act. If that parent doesn't act, the school may proceed. So even Purple for Parents, which they started this part of it, they're the cohort of people that fight against Red for Ed. They don't like this part because they think that they don't have time to check their emails. And so that takes away rights from the parents. People are, I don't understand, but that
also, I think so. It's very important to point out that social emotional learning is another term that has been hijacked by national political rhetoric to be considered something that it's just not. The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL defines 5 core social emotional competency clusters. So that's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So when we're talking about any curriculum that is built around an SEL principle, that's what they're focused on. And I can tell you that I spent a year lobbying for the school safety referendum, and there's just this stigma that is attached to access to mental health care that I think people just have a really hard time getting over. And for some reason, SEL has just been taken over by people who are afraid of the other, I think, when it comes to mental health.
Right. And Misty worked diligently trying to get this referendum passed. Unfortunately, there were some unfortunate circumstances of, I think, that violated voter integrity that caused that, which I'm not bitter about at all. But that came close to passing this at the referendum, but there were also people that were fighting against it.
I have a question. How does this, is this attached at all to, what if a student requests their parent not be told if they see a school counselor about an issue? Or what if a student comes to a counselor about an issue that that their home is unsafe? What happens then?
And that is an excellent point, because some of our feedback that we've given legislators is that teachers are mandatory reporters. So if a home is not safe, we are mandated by federal law that we have to report that. We have to disclose that. And we have to talk to the kid about it. Of course, you're not going to call home and say, hi, Johnny says he doesn't feel safe at home. You're not going to do that. That's not safe. And back to your first question, part of our feedback to legislators were, we had several students and several parents that said, if my child had not spoken to a counselor or a teacher about their gender identity, then that child would not be with me today. They would have killed themselves. They would have committed suicide. I wouldn't have had a chance to have the opportunity to talk to my child about that. And it's because of a teacher or a counselor that has saved their lives, and my child is still with us today. So that's excellent feedback. That's exactly what we're talking about. That point you just made, Amy. Yes, that is a problem. And so, and I think that's part of the SEL too, is that, there is some pretty disgusting views on gender identity that people in the state house are fighting against, and that's something that we're trying to defeat.
Well, and it applies to depression and things too. We've seen in our own school district, we've had experiences with suicide, attempted suicide, and there have been crisis intervention, things that have been done to proactively be available to offer support for students who need it. And that's so important. If you have to wait 10 days, 30 days for those things, it can be too late. So
Exactly. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. So, and then this is the part I think that Misty was talking about with surveys, personal evaluations, or analysis in the classroom. A student shall not be required to participate in a personal analysis, an evaluation, or a survey that reveals or attempts to affect the student's attitudes, habits, traits, opinions, beliefs, or feelings without the prior written consent of the parent. It's interesting because they have now amended that to a third-party survey, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing in this house, you guys, because right before we heard testimony for this House Bill 1134, the Education and Career Development Committee for the Senate heard and passed a bill about a third-party survey that would be required by the state. And so they passed this bill, but then under this bill, House Bill 1134, it would not be allowed. So they're not sure what they're doing to contradict each other, and they seem oblivious to that, which is mind-boggling as well. But that's an interesting portion of the bill. Anything else on that, Misty?
no, I mean, again, I think this is it's a waste of time. It's not clear. It's not tangible. This isn't something that we can directly say how it will impact our local schools. It's just pointless. Is what it is.
And we keep repeating that this bill is a problem in search of it's a solution in search of a problem, and there is no problem, but it implies and tries to act like there is one. There is no problem, and so having this bill passed takes away the opportunity for meaningful conversation within the classroom. This section of the bill would not allow me to read a book in English and say, well, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? What were your thoughts about this? How do you think this character felt? And you couldn't discuss it. So it would make teachers afraid of what they can and cannot say in the classroom. And so when teachers are afraid in a time where we have a teacher crisis or shortage crisis, you have new teachers that are unsure of what is kosher, quote unquote, and what they don't want to lose their job because they need it, because they have student loans to pay, then it's going to take away the opportunity for meaningful conversations, very much needed.
It does instill fear. We talked just briefly before the meeting started. There's a local elementary school. I saw this on the internet, so I don't know how true it is. Local elementary school in our congressional district that sent home an opt-out form for families who weren't comfortable about their elementary age students learning the curriculum surrounding Black History Month. That's terrifying.
Right.
So.
And I mean, they had to preface it by saying that we believe that everyone should be treated kindly and everyone should be treated as an equal. And if you'd like to opt your child out, then please sign this form. But if you don't want those lessons, I mean, it's just absurd. Why would you have to send that? I mean, yeah. Okay. Next slide. So if you click that little hyperlink, it tells you what the amendments to House Bill 1134 are. This is from the Indiana Senate Republicans. To be perfectly honest, I was entrenched in the State House. I was there on Tuesday. I stayed the night and stayed on Wednesday. And then I was busy from the morning until about 7 o'clock at night. The amendments came out Tuesday night. We had an emergency meeting with ISTA, Indiana State Teachers Association, through Zoom, and they summarized, but they were still, it's such a massive bill. They're still digesting everything. It is a much better bill. The premise of what the message is for the bill is still there, which is still very much a concern. When we heard testimony yesterday, so we had the meeting Tuesday night, then we met with legislators on Wednesday. Then we heard testimony. We heard testimony from 1:30 till about 7 on various bills. And so when we were listening to the testimony, it's everyone, almost everyone was still opposed to this bill, even with the amendments. They did thank Senator Rogers for her amendments and said it's much improved. However, it's still unneeded. And their message was is that this bill needs to go away. And I don't know if you guys realize, but there are people across the nation that are watching this bill and worried that if this bill passes in Indiana, then what similar bills are going to pass in their state. And so they're watching. I've heard reports from other teachers where they've gone to conventions and there's teachers in Texas. They're like, oh my gosh, Indiana, House Bill 1134, we're so sorry, Indiana. And there's teachers all across, there are even people, not just teachers, there's people all over that are watching this. Stephen Colbert are watching this and saying, this is disgusting what this message is. What are you trying to do? So I will read briefly, look through here. I'll just go through the key points. Can you scroll down, Amy? Yeah, I don't know if you can see it, and if not, because it is pretty small, but I'll go ahead and review it. But it removes the requirement for educators to post a list of learning materials and instead provides transparency by ensuring parents have access to their school's learning management system, allowing parents to review any other learning materials used in their child's classroom upon request. So we interpret that as pacing guides. You still have access to what we post on Google Classroom. And we still have conversations with parents. That's not the issue. And you can ask questions about this here at the end when I get done. But it says it does not require school districts to have a curriculum advisory committee. So as I'd mentioned, they did away with a committee. It removes the current prescriptive complaint process in House Bill number 1134. So instead of having a complaint process, you go directly to the teacher as it should be. It removes language about lawsuits for violations of the bills, instead allows parents to appeal the Indiana Department of Education to take administration action for a violation if they remain unsatisfied after following the school's grievance process. So it still provides an avenue to take administration action, but they encourage you to first go to the teacher and the school principal and then the school district before you go to that route. It removes the sections about materials harmful to minors and sexually explicit materials. Since much of this language is included in Senate Bill 17, which that is the license or the library censorship bill that I'll talk about here in a minute. And it removes language requiring schools to be impartial about teaching about historical events. It streamlines a list of divisive concepts that schools may not teach, the 3 specific concepts that stereotype people based on sex, race, ethnicity, and religion, color, and national origin, with the amendment that schools cannot teach that. So they had 8 tenets in the original bill. Now it's down to 3 tenets of what you can and cannot discuss as a teacher. And these are the 3 that it is now down to in the amendment. Is that one group is inherently superior or inferior to another, that one group should be treated adversely or preferentially. And then this is the tenet that is controversial still. It says individuals by virtue of their traits are inherently responsible for past actions of others who share their traits. So it's vague. What is a trait? And that's hard to define. Again, we all want to agree that no one is better than someone else, but we also need to acknowledge the American history and what has become part of our nation. So that's part of it as well. It explicitly states that nothing in the chapter shall be construed to exclude the teaching or discussion of factual history or historical injustices committed against any sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin. And it shortens the window of time that schools must wait for parental response before beginning ongoing non-emergency mental health services for a student. Under the amendment, parents would have 7 days to opt their child out of the services if the parent is contacted electronically. In all instances, parents would receive 2 separate notices, giving them a chance to opt their child out of services if the parents disagree to the school's decision, and parents would continue to have the ability to end services after they have started. So that addresses the SEL portion of it. So it cut that time in half of when parents can respond. It did cut it in half, but it still provides a process that is too long. I think it goes down to 7 days. And it's still concerning. It adds language, and again, that language is vague. There's so many questions for that part. And it adds language stipulating parental notice requirements do not apply to daily interactions between school staff and students. So it does add that component to it, that it's not daily interactions between. So if something pops up with the child in a daily interaction, then you're allowed to address it. Thank you so much. So it specifies parental notice isn't needed to provide services in a crisis situation when a student is in immediate danger of harming themselves or others, or when a student is in immediate danger of abuse or neglect. And that goes back to address your issue or your question, Amy. So it did add that little section in there. So it specified those parts. Any questions on the amendment?
And I know that we kind of get lost in the weeds of the details sometimes. And I know Christy said it's a better amendment, or it's a better piece of legislation. It's not. It's a terrible piece of legislation. I know you didn't mean it that way. It's a terrible piece of legislation, and now it has no teeth. It really, it's just exists to undermine our teachers and put unnecessary strain and burden on them. And that's something that we have to remember. I just feel sometimes like we get trapped in this vicious circle of accepting that it's better than it was, and that's still terrible. And this is terrible.
And Missy has called me out on that before, because that's where we are with public education. As a teacher, you just get so thankful for a bone that you're thrown, and then you have friends like Misty. They're like, and she'll tell you how it is and say, why are you thankful? Stop it. This is awful. And so she's right. So she has grounded me more than one occasion where I've said thank you, and she's like, no, you're gonna stop saying thank you right now. So and she's right. So I should not be thankful for this small tiny little parcel of a bone that they've thrown us. We're in a situation that we should not even be in, thanks to all this mess, but here we are. So Misty does a good job of reminding me of that. So Senate Bill 356, we're going to move on unless there's any questions for House Bill 1134.
Nick here, I got a question, but
Sure.
Even though with this watered down and it's not good still, this is still a foundation for improving on it at a later time. So what is the standpoint upon, I know you wanted Nick's, but if they pass it, this will just give them a little bit more fuel to the fire to do something else later in the future. So how are you preventing that?
It's an excellent point. And we have brought that up to Senator Bayline and asked them, why are you giving voice to these small faction of people? Small. And all you're doing is empowering them. And it's only adding to political division. It helps nothing. It solves nothing. And it's unnecessary. So we have repeatedly said that. We're going to continue to repeatedly say that. With a super majority, it's hard to fight. To be honest, we're going to continue to just, when we spread our message out there, that is the message they need to hear. Why I'm a parent, or even I'm a conservative, because there are several conservatives that have come to me and said, this bill is crap. And we don't need this. And I am grateful, if I said before, if there's any silver lining to this mess, is that I've had people from the other side of the aisle, because there's no secret what my political affiliation is. And I've had people come to me and say, I do not understand what my party is doing. I don't understand why this has become part of our state. It's embarrassing and I don't support it. So I think that's the silver lining, of that people that normally wouldn't talk to me politically have come up to me and have initiated conversation that said, this is complete bull and I do not stand for this. So I appreciate that. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Unfortunately,
Also-
they'll continue to vote for the people that push this through while this is used to
Right.
Yeah,
raise the base of non-voters. They want to
right.
enrage and engage.
My wish is that they put their money where their mouth is, and that's always a constant frustration of mine. And I don't know how to change that.
Well, I have some idea. I have some ideas.
Okay.
So here we are having this conversation in the women's caucus, right? This is advocacy for public education is not a women's issue. I think that the general public assumes that topics of public education legislation are made with benevolence. You know, it's a service that's needed. We all benefit from it, right? And we all benefit from it. You know, the community depends on it in so many ways. Why wouldn't we have schools that were properly funded? Why wouldn't we have legislation that made sense and encouraged children to grow into healthy, whole adults? I think that we're at a position in time right now where we have to remember that we can't depend on that idea that benevolence is happening. We all have to advocate at every level. So I think it can't be confined to the women's caucus. We're all hands on deck. We should be asking every single candidate that's asking for your vote. Like, don't even say, do you support public ed? Ask them directly how they're actively working to strengthen public education. See what they say.
Right.
And that's what we have to do at this point. It's,
Do you support vouchers? Right. So do you support school choice? And that is, interestingly enough, with the school choice, we've kind of turned that around and said, you know, for all these people that are saying they want such a voice in what we do and demanding what they have an impact on how our day looks, you know, you've invested so much money in school choice. They have a choice where they can go anywhere. They can go to any private charter. It's going to be free at this point for most. I mean, we've kind of turned that back around. That's the frustrating part is they've created all this legislature that's going to hurt public schools. Now they have exactly what they want. So you have what you want. Take your views and go to where you want the money to be. Because, you know, bye. And
we talk about public education funding in a way too that I think it's a complex thing. Like when it's framed in a way that says school choice, it sounds great, right? Like if your child has a certain need that can be better filled in a neighboring county, you have the ability to, if you have the resources, but that's a different issue, to take your kid to another county to have those needs met. You can get vouchers for public education, but what we don't talk about is how that starves local public schools. We don't talk about how that freedom to choose for families of privilege takes away from the basic needs of everyone. And it's made, I mean, I have to believe that it's made to be so complicated to take away the authority from people making good decisions, and they assume that it's taken care of, and it's just not.
right.
Christy, this is Sharon. I'd like to ask a couple questions if I could.
Sure.
So you all kind of cleared that up in this. My first question was, does this apply to public and private schools both? I'm taking that it does not apply to private.
It does not.
So that just leads me to jump to the conclusion that they're just purposely trying to make this complicated and difficult in order to trend people towards one aspect of schooling or another. So that's just my cynical side coming out. But I do have another question. When legislation, and this is just a legislative process a question, when legislation is being examined like this, do they have a responsibility similar to the bidding office in federal legislation to do a practical cost benefit analysis on the procedural bureaucracy they're creating as a result of their legislation, or is that just not discussed? Because this is going to be a small nightmare to administer. It looks like, anyway.
For sure, right. And an example of that would be another bill that we'll discuss, which I forget the house number off the cuff, but I think I have it in the slides, where they created this ESA voucher system where you're created, like you're given a debit card or something. And
Mhm.
they've underestimated the cost of running this program for the vouchers for the ESA. And so there is a bill currently in this legislation that it would, you could take 10%. They want to increase it, and they claim it's not an increase in the program. Well, bull crap, it really is. And so they've underestimated the cost of this program that they created. And so the treasurer's department is kind of caught with their pants down because they don't have enough money to fund this program. So for administration costs. So yeah, no, they're not thinking about
Okay, thank you.
that.
That was, I didn't enjoy that presentation, but it was very informative.
Another example of that was before they made that amendment that the curriculum was supposed to be made public, by the teachers by like, if it was July 30th, June 30th, I don't know what it was.
It's
That
changed.
that's a whole other labor expense that wasn't factored into salary. I mean,
Right.
we're gonna add that to the overburdened teachers. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't know who they think, what teacher is going to work for free and jump through these hoops because for something they don't agree with, just on fundamental values.
A lot of people apparently think that a lot of teachers, all the teachers want to work for free.
Right. I'm not doing it. I mean, I've seen teachers with #FireMe because it will not happen. I won't do it. And we've told legislators, I'm going to teach my students the exact same way I've been teaching them to be good humans and to realize that there is definite prejudice. There are things that facts in American history that has happened and that we need to acknowledge these difficult conversations. So
Christy and Misty.
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you, Christy.
Sure, go ahead.
Please finish your thought.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
So, first of all, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing and going to Indianapolis and putting in this fight for us in Indianapolis. This is so important for our community, and I just want to express my gratitude for you doing this. I'm also really concerned about this. This is a highly aggressive level of legislation. And so if we, to enact this, thinking about this new witch hunt that we're creating for educators, and that it absolutely turns our attention away from teaching and learning and ensuring that we are improving student outcomes every year that they are in school. I mean, we're coming off of a pandemic where students missed school. They were exposed to trauma or experienced trauma firsthand. And so let's get back to how are our students achieving? Let's just look at the nuts and bolts of reading, math, science, social studies, and writing before we pivot to this highly aggressive level of legislation that's going to create people looking for, are you teaching CRT or are you teaching reading? Are you teaching math? This is just really mind-boggling to me, and it's blindsiding when we think about the type of work that's going to have to happen to administrate this.
I'm glad you said that because I did approach that. I got to meet Zach Payne. He's not my representative, but I went with other teachers from Greater Clark, and I asked him that very question. Why is this our big rock? Why are we not focusing on student proficiency? And I think, Erica, you and I have talked about before, why are we not focusing on proficiency or achievement of students of color? And why are we focusing on this and not that? Why is this what we're going to focus on? And I'm going to tell you what the answer was. And his answer was that because this is the squeaky wheel. And so this is what gets the grease. This is what is current. And as egregious and disgusting, and it made my ears bleed. That was the answer that I got, and that is not an acceptable answer in any form. But he made several comments that it was just so vast of just the level of disconnect that he had. It was clear that he didn't follow education. He didn't, in my opinion, he didn't. It wasn't a top priority to him. He was just following along what other people told him. So that is not the answer you want to hear. I know, because I definitely didn't want to hear it, but that is the answer I got.
In my opinion, too, it's like you look at reading and math recovery programs that are needed, that kind of stuff, following, this disruption. I mean, it's been a traumatic event, it's a traumatic event for these kids, but beyond that, COVID it's added a whole new layer of struggle for children and families that make these SEL programs even more important today than ever before. And attacking them as some illegitimate, invasive thing that, disrupts parental rights or disrupts local control is very dangerous. So,
yeah. So any other topics of discussion or questions about House Bill 1134?
I try to type it in, but I've got two really quick questions. I know we have to move on. One, with the watered down bill, even though it's some relief, has the amount of teachers when we were up there saying, if this goes through, I'm going to quit, has that reduced? And the other part is, you just spoke a little bit, Ms. Misty, about programs needed to get our students caught up. How far behind of a grade level because of the pandemic are they? Because I've seen research and with the nonprofit I work with for a school that they're almost a grade to 2 grade levels behind.
I'm gonna let Erica address that second question, because as an administrator, I think she has done more studies on that, but I'll address the first one of the art will teachers quit. This amended bill is more palatable. It's a relief to have the components of it that you just post a pacing guide, which is one document. That is okay. I can live with that. And I thought about that, because when I'm listening to testimony, would this be a deal breaker for me? It is still disgusting. Is it a deal breaker? I'm going to say, for me personally, I'm going to say no, because I still love my job and I want to help kids. However, so, but I'm still going to teach. I'm not going to change a dang on thing on how I do my job. You can find me, you can report me. I'm not going to change. I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. And basically, I'm just going to ignore this bill. And
I heard at the school board meeting the other night, they were talking about local programs, at the college level, for teachers, and at IUS, apparently, like that teaching program is now half the size as it was just a couple of years ago. We're getting to the point where, as if the pandemic wasn't enough, to put stress and burden on teachers, now we're adding more to it. Who's willingly walking into this? I've heard several high school seniors say, my intention was to go to college to be an educator, and now I'm not going to. It's terrifying to think who will be teaching our children in 10 years if this is the trend.
For sure. And I've had WNAS, I've had our bagpiper students from both of those areas. And I've had students that are doing reports on this bill and have emailed me questions and come to me. And several of them have said, oh, I wanted to go into education, but I'm not going to do it if this bill isn't passed. And I heard at the school board meeting that I think Dr. Snyder has spoken to IUS. I think each year they had 40 student teachers, or maybe it was 80, but regardless, it has gone down by half to the amount of students that are in the education program, the student teaching program. So it is scaring people away. And the ones that are still there are still going to do what they've been doing. And the ones that aren't scared, ones that are like me, that, I mean, you can tell me that I have to do this, but I'm not going to change my methodologies. I'm not going to change my ideologies. I'm not going to fit into the bubble that you think I need to fit in so that you can think I'm solving a problem that isn't there. So no, for me, I'll still do what I'm doing. But I don't know how other teachers feel. Does that answer your question?
Can
Nick?
you say yes? I just put a thumbs up. I'm sorry. I didn't want to take up more
Yeah.
time.
No, you're fine. And then Erica, did you want to address the second part of his question?
About students being behind. Like my district, for example, was virtual longer than New Albany Floyd in Indiana, excuse me. So we have absolutely can see that there's some gaps in learning. As a result of this, we are absolutely feeling the pressure of hiring. This is the first time in recent modern history that Louisville Public School, Jefferson County Public Schools has had to advertise using a third-party agency like Indeed or, all those, those platforms for people who go to look for jobs. JCPS used to be able to post a vacancy on their website and get plenty of applicants. I can say as an administrator, I post jobs and I may not get any applicants. And now we're hiring people who do not have credentials, getting them emergency licenses. And it is absolutely going to impact what happens in classrooms for children. So we have to think about how we provide the most highly qualified educator to come before our students each day to make sure that they are able to have critical thinking skills, because that happens through reading, being able to solve problems, being able to have an understanding of science and social studies. So we absolutely, this can become a serious crisis for the profession and for most importantly, our children.
Thank you. Misty, anything else?
Oh, gosh. Are we wrapping up or are we moving on to a different?
I think we can, if there's no other comments or questions about it, I think we can move on.
Well, because if we're going to wrap up, I have a plea because this is a thing about me, and you'll know if you're my friend, you'll know this. Like I'll listen to you complain, but then when you walk away, I'm going to give you a homework assignment because I like everybody to be empowered to make a difference. So if we're ready for that part, let me know.
Sure. Well, I think that's at the end too. Well, and we can attach it here, but we can definitely.
No, let's go on to the next.
Reiterate. Okay, so go back a slide, Amy. So Senate Bill 356. This one's is more of a concern for. It is concerning. It is considered union vesting. It contains three main concepts: the supplemental pay for teachers, adjunct teaching permits, and alternative certification program. And it removes discussion with exclusive representative or supplements, fractures the bargaining unit, pitting the teacher against teacher, takes money off the table for bargaining for everyone, and takes us back to trusty days and favoritism. And again, there's been some amendments to this where you can go to the next slide, where it's not allows for adjunct teacher. I guess I should say that. So adjunct teachers, and they can create their own, go back a slide. They can create their own kind of agreement or contract without including the union, without including a bargaining, and not included in the bargaining. There's been some amendments to this bill. I don't think it's going to go very much further. The fact that it was created was a problem because it just cheapens the profession. It waters down the teaching profession. It doesn't require a praxis. At one point, before there were some amendments on this bill, it said that anyone that taught special ed, and I'm a teacher of record, meaning I have a list of students that I'm in charge of, and I have about 60 kids that I'm in charge of that have IEPs. And there's a lot of pedagogy that is involved in that, and student or people that would take practice in this part of the bill would not understand that pedagogy, which would affect students of need. And so it didn't take an effect, but it used to have a proponent in it with special education, that if you were a parent of a child with special needs, if you had 1 year of practical experience and you were at least 26 years of age, then you could be a teacher of record. And that is clearly not enough. So I could babysit under that premise. I could babysit Lisa's cousin's uncle's kid and have the qualifications if I was 26 because I had clinical practice that I did that for a year. Then it's just is an insult to what we actually do. So I wrote written testimony for that portion, that for special ed specifically, and that was removed, not because of my personal letter. I don't give myself that credit, but that part was amended out. It's not as big of a big deal. It has been changed. There's also a similar bill, House Bill 1251, that is similar to that. Rita Fleming did vote for that. And there's some administrations that support it. They think that will help. But the fact of the matter remains, it should not be a solution to the teacher shortage crisis. And that is, I think, part of the reason why this bill was created. Ed Clear also voted for it. It's been a bipartisan support. And I'm not as concerned, honestly, with that one. It is a concern.
And I don't know if everybody understands, it's the idea that, like through emergency certifications and things like that, people would be able to come and teach inside of classrooms without any sort of experience or training in education. So let's say no experience with classroom management, but they're coming into the public school from a business setting. And if you were to ask a parent, hey, would you like your child to be taught a business class by the CEO of Brown-Forman? They might say yes. But that's not what this looks like in practice. So I think that it's like a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage. They're like, whatever we can do to get bodies in the classroom to teach our children right now, but that is not the solution.
And again, this is another instance where I'm like, if you looked at the bullet points, there's already 10 different alternate pathways to teaching. It's just another slap in the face. So, I mean, it's no surprise. And I don't honestly see someone coming from Eli Lilly and coming and teaching science for teacher pay. But it is a concern that it's just another fast track online program. So it's another way to provide money to a vendor. And so that, again, is insulting. I'm like, and as a teacher, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, no surprise here. So maybe I should have more enraged reaction, but at this point in time, I've come desensitized to bills like that. So, which is a problem altogether. That is something that I'm going to have to deal with internally, because thank God for Misty, where she again reminds me that I should be enraged. So anything else, Misty, on that?
Not on this one.
Okay, next. So House Bill 1041, this one didn't have testimony. It was voted on in the Education and Career Development Committee yesterday, and they didn't take testimony yesterday, but they did vote. It did pass 8-3. So now it will move to Senate for a full vote. For House Bill 1041 would prohibit transgender girls from participating on girls' athletic teams in schools, but it does not prevent the opposite. So that bill passed out of the House with 66-30, and then it passed out of the Education and Career Development 8-3. I don't know who Senator Buchanan is. Not had the pleasure, quote, I guess. I'm not even gonna say pleasure. I've not met him. I got to watch him in action, and that was pretty eye-opening. Some pretty discriminatory views coming from his head. So that will go to Senate. Any questions on that one? Okay. House Bill 1072, this one I'm sure gets Misty's blood boiling because Misty did a lot of work for the referendum, but it requires, before it was optional, but now this one requires the sharing of referendum dollars with charter schools. So Misty could do all the work and then have to share that with a charter school. So sharing referenda revenue is already an option for school boards and should remain a local decision. Misty?
I could talk for days on this, so I won't, but it's not just about sharing, it's about responsibility and reporting. Charter schools are not held to the same standards as public charter schools too. Private schools are not, they're not held to the same standard. They're not required to report in the same way. It's not the same. In general, referendums are a very faulty tool that are thrown back by the state of Indiana to local people to say, hey, if you have a community that feels like whatever project you're working on, whether it's a capital adventure or like the school safety referendum was something different, but some do operational budget referendums. So it's to pay teachers and things like that. If your community feels that it's important enough to do this, they'll invest by choosing to vote yes on a referendum in a general election. And that puts the burden on schools to run huge campaigns to inform the general public. And you're basically asking them to agree to pay optional tax, additional tax. So it's terrible on all fronts. So pretty much anything related to referendums, just please be very discerning.
Yes. Any questions on either of those two bills? Okay, moving on to Senate Bill 17. This is another one that is makes me sick. It's a library censorship bill. Says that you are removes harmful materials to minors, removes existing legal defenses for schools and libraries may use when locally determining educational materials to be used, likely resulting in more litigation. And this is what we've seen across the nation with states in like Tennessee, where they're burning books. I've heard that they're burning books in Lake County. And it's again, more political divisiveness on what is considered appropriate or harmful to minors. It's disgusting that they're attacking books when they have access to internet and TikTok. And I realize you can't regulate those things. You can regulate books, but you can't, this is their solution to how teachers are indoctrinating students. Another just insult and slap in the face, trying to control a problem that doesn't exist. Any questions on that one? All right, Senate Bill 331. This is, I kind of referenced this earlier. They didn't have enough money for their ESA startup. Allows the treasurer to leverage up to 10% of the funds to start up the state's new voucher program, the ESA program. And I talked about that earlier in the session. Next. Oh, House Bill 1107. I ran out of time. I'm sorry. I can talk about this. And this one was Ed Clear's bill. And there was a lot of testimony on this one yesterday. I got to watch. I was going to add it to the last minute, and then I got a phone call from Adam. But House Bill 1107, there's good parts to it. And then there's a part that received a lot of pushback. What it does essentially is it creates a part legislation where teachers, they have to report if they've gotten hurt, which we're in support of. But then it also ties in with special education, and it puts the onus of providing the burden of proof. If a parent says that special education needs aren't met, it makes the burden of proof fall on the school instead of the parent. So Ed Clear got a lot of pushback on that. And there was probably an hour and a half of testimony on that yesterday. So that is one to watch because that's become controversial as well. And so that was interesting to see where that went, and a lot of good testimony in support of special education and what teachers do for that as well. So these are contact your representatives. Senator Bayline, I will say that, some of you saw my Facebook post earlier. He has been receptive to talking to us. So if you reach out to him, then he will have a conversation with you. Also, Ed Clear, he has stood against House Bill 1134 and has given me kind of the background information that's happening since the amendment came out. He revealed that there's been a lot of, it's become toxic in the Republican side because there are some Republicans that are very much against the amendment. And the amendment took away everything that they were fighting for and hoping to accomplish. And so now there's a lot of Republicans that are extremely upset about this amendment. And so there's different camps in the Republican Party on where they stand with that. So definitely 1134, going back to that, that's the hot topic bill. And it's gonna get interesting. There's hope it's gonna go in the favor of public education and teachers and people in general, humanity. Next.
I think it's a misstep right now to sigh a breath of, relief. The legislation session is not over. So if you do nothing else tonight, take from this meeting, call or email your representatives and share that and ask other people to do the same.
Right, because this House Bill 1134 is not done being amended. It is going to go through another amendment and it could come back. And I'm told that it's not going away. It's not going to die like Senate Bill 167 did, which was the sister bill in the Senate when they embarrassed themselves by their stupid comments. And so this is going to get amended and it's here to stay. So we need to continue to push back on what they are writing into this legislation.
And it's not just, like-minded people. If you have a diverse group of friends, who may be more conservative on certain points, it's ideal for them to call, and express concern too, so that we make it clear that this is not a partisan issue. This is a pro-public education issue, and that everybody is responsible for that.
Say it's a humanity issue. It's pro-public education, but it's also, it's just common sense of how you should treat people, what you should talk, the conversations you should have, the meaningful conversations. So it's, again, we need to fight against political division. This is completely unnecessary.
Also opens the door wide open for aggressive legislation across the board.
Yes,
So.
right. And that's my biggest concern, is that it just continues to empower these people who are so far out there, just so extreme. And it continues to empower them. And we need to squash that. Okay, next. I waited for Chris Garten for over an hour. And I've had other teachers that, and I'll be fair. They are busy. I'll be fair. But I'm just saying, the other legislators, all the ones listed on here, they all met with me, and they met with other teachers too. Chris Garten, I think maybe has met with, he's maybe met for maybe a total of 15 minutes. And he said that there's no point in meeting with teachers before the amendment will come out. And so he's not concerned with it. I've never met him. I've liked to talk to him, but I've never had the opportunity to have a conversation with him. I don't think education is his top priority. He's not interested in discussing it, but go ahead and try and reach out to him if he's in your area and see if you have better luck than I have. But I've never spoke with him. And then Karen Engelman has she was the one. She said that she believes that teachers are indoctrinating children, especially in Lake County, and that their teachers are admitting it. She does not want, her words, she does not want to hurt education, but she doesn't want teachers to teach kids to hate America. Her words, quote unquote. So reach out to her as well. And then Rita Fleming, as always, has been very supportive. She is, I've met with her a few times. She's always very pleasant. She is, be sure, I should mention this. The the people that you know are pro public education, make sure that you reach out to them and just say thank you for what you do, because sometimes they get lost in the weeds, and they're important people that we need to continue to let them know that we acknowledge what they're doing. It's not easy. I saw firsthand the fight that they had to fight, and God love them, because I watched Shelley Yoder, she pushed back, and they are forces to be reckoned with, because they are not staying quiet in a super majority. And it was fun to watch them kind of push back and ask these questions when they were a small voice, but they didn't let that stop them. So make sure you reach out to Rita and thank her for what she does. Next. This is a resist bot. I've done this. It's kind of fun because it tells you how many people have followed your cause. So you can text that, ask your legislators to vote no on House Bill 1134. I'm assuming they're still doing it after the amendment. I don't see why not. Couldn't hurt. So you can.
I tested it last night and it still worked.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
And
Good.
this, if you share this on your Facebook, for people who are more savvy and willing to text, it's very easy because it will identify your representatives for you. So not everybody understands who their Senate and House people are, or how to contact them. I always think it's more impactful to call, and speak to somebody or leave a message than it is to send a form letter, but it'll work, or do both.
Mm-hmm. So that's an option as well. Is that the last slide? No. So this is just a summary. Tell them to vote no. The asterisks, the bills with the asterisk next to it, with one asterisk is discriminatory. The two asterisks is censorship. Those are the ones that we feel are most impactful for you to make your voice heard on. House Bill 1107 is the one that I mentioned was Ed Clear's bill. And if you have a problem with the burden of proof, then and you want to speak to that as well, then you that would be the number you would need for that, House Bill 1107. All right, I think that's the last slide. And there's the one I was going to show the we're going to talk about Erica. Are you still there?
I don't think so. I don't believe so. Yeah, I think she had a hard stop at 7
Oh, that's
o'clock.
right. She does have her. Yes, she has.
Yeah,
her
she's-
stuff going on.
Yeah, she has her
Yeah,
book club meeting.
so
Yes.
we should, go through these.
Yes, she has
Right.
she's right now in the middle of her 1619 book talk, which I've been a part of, which is
Right.
very intriguing and interesting. And so right now, she asked us to mention, and I'm happy to mention that we're going to have racial attitudes with Dr. Emmett Riley. He's a political science professor from DePaul University on March 24th at 6 o'clock. And I'm assuming it's going to be at the library, but we'll also have a Zoom link to that as well. And that link will be announced. And then a book discussion with Dr. Erica Lawrence. I don't know if some of you know Dan Cannon. He wrote this book. He's a local attorney. And we're going to have a discussion with him on May 26th. So we hope that you can join us with that one as well. And I'm also going to show you how you can go to the ISTA website. They do have, speaking of form letters, they have take action forms that you can do. And I'm going to show you how you can do that. It's pretty simple. They have forms for these bills that you can send to representatives. It'll send it to your correct representative. Let me pull that up. And give me 1 second. And you can either use their wording or you can tweak it and add your own. However you want to do it, and then it'll send it to those legislators. My computer is very, very slow. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see that? Yes?
Yes.
So this is the ISTA in.org. You just go to this, click, hover over our advocacy, take action. And they have 2 take actions right now. One's for House Bill 1134, of course. And then the other one is for House Bill 1072. And so that's the sharing of referendum money, the House Bill 1074 or 1072. So if you fill this out, and then they'll have a script that you can either use or you can tweak. And that's another easy way to contact your legislators. Any questions on that?
IST, some of this information just gets so convoluted. And for me, ISTA is a great resource, as well as our local NAFCEA, so our local Teachers Association, for finding how to help support local public education. So please follow ISTA.
And it's right. They have a bill watch. They give you up-to-date information about it. So this advocacy tab right here gives you a lot of information of what's going on in the legislative session.
It's the time to beg for help.
Yeah.
Okay, so remember, this legislative session is not over. Make your calls, make your emails. In addition to that, please follow along to ISTA and the local Teachers Association. I cannot tell you how important our local school board is at running defense and supporting our local consolidated school at providing equity for our kids. If you are interested in public education, please pay close attention to the local school board. Come to meetings, they're online. There's a YouTube channel. It's super easy to follow along. The next meeting is March 14th. But don't limit it to school board. Make waves. Contact your city council, your county commissioners, and voice your support of public education. Just getting all of this out into the sunlight is so important right now. I cannot say enough about Facebook shares and posts. Reach people where they are. Give them various modes to help. If it's something as easy as a text message or an email, some people are apt to do that, whereas other people might come with you to Indianapolis, to lobby, but they might not know that that's an option. I think that we've had a big push to recruit supporters of public education beyond our Teachers Association, and we have to continue to do that. So please take that and do that in all of your circles, beyond the Women's Caucus, out into the general party, out into service organizations that you belong to, church organizations, PTOs and PTAs, all of that. And let's just keep this going. It's so important right now.
And so if anyone wants to have a copy of the slideshow, I'm happy to share that with you. You can email us at floyddemwomen at gmail.com, and I can send that to you if you would like a copy of the slideshow, just as a reminder. Anything else?
Thank you
That
all
was-
for being here.
Yeah, that was fantastic. It was really great. Thank you so much. So insightful.
So, well, thank you guys for coming, and I hope that the people that that request a record get a chance to watch it, and if they have any questions, they reach out to us as well. So thank you guys. It was great to see you all. I hope we get to, like I said, I was saying earlier that I met with an ER nurse today for a conference, and she said that they've not seen a COVID case at the hospital in 2 weeks. So hopefully that's a good sign, knock on wood. We can all meet in person and not have to worry about all this yucky stuff. So.
And thank you for inviting me to listen. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming, Nick.
You're
It
welcome.
was good to see you at the State House last week, Nick. Please keep up the good work.
Oh, I do what I can. I do what I can. Thank you.
Christy and Misty, this was very good. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any questions, just let us know. I'm going to stop recording. Hang on, that hit, where's the stupid button? Stop recording.